Hello everyone. It's been a while since the last Valkyrie investment video. We're in version 5.0 now and a lot has changed. We'll go over each Valkyrie one by one. Swallowtail Phantasm is one of the first Valkyries you obtain in the game as a new player. When you're first starting out the game, she is great for general use, as a quantum type has no weakness at the moment. She excels at dealing with enemy groups, but does rely a bit on Impair. In the endgame, she doesn't have too much usage. She has one boss and can deal with some of the Abyss stages. Overall, a good transitory Valkyrie for new players. Drive Kometa is the augmented version of Yamabuki armor, and I highly recommend her. She's an excellent physical support that provides SP, protection, and tons of time fracture on her block. She also provides extra shield break for your team and a weakness debuff. This effectively means she is a must-have for Memorial Arena and is used in tons of different teams. She has perfect synergy with Fervent Tempo, and those two together will carry you through a lot of content. Divine Prayer is another starter character you get, and is one of the only impair sources that you have early on. She impairs passively, so if you put her on the team and don't switch into her, you can just leave her there, and your physical DPS will do more damage. Keep in mind this is a single target impair, so it's only a temporary solution. In the endgame, Divine Prayer is used as a support for lightning teams in Memorial Arena due to her synergy with the weapon Thunder Kikaku. So once you get those weapons and get your Lightning Empress to SS, I recommend getting Divine Prayer to SS as well. Hawk of the Fog is the augment core of Valkyrie Accipiter and is a great early game Valkyrie. Most of the content she handles is handled by the Herrscher of Thunder better. However, with the introduction of some new Valkyries, you may choose to get the Herrscher of Thunder much later. If you do choose to do this, then raising Hawk of the Fog is a pretty good replacement, as she still has excellent damage output for a Psychic Lightning. She also does extremely well with free gear and is pretty fun to play. Blueberry Blitz is a fantastic investment for Memorial Arena. She mostly becomes relevant after level 80 due to many strategies being opened up from the pre-armed sleeper stream. Overall, her playstyle perfectly fits with the current meta of having both high burst and debuffs, as well as time fracture. This means she can easily mesh as both a support and a DPS. She's also a good source of freeze trauma, which is very rare. Sakuno Rondo is currently the fire staple support after the introduction of her pre-arm Salvation of Sakura. This cross not only ignites, but provides a significant debuff. Rondo herself also provides an elemental buff to the team at double S rank, on top of having a very quick ignite fill, which is very useful for trauma and just igniting in general. The Herrscher of Sentience is currently my #1 recommendation to all new players. This is because she has an all-in-one kit. So even if you have absolutely no game knowledge, the Herrscher of Sentience can support herself, impair for herself, buff herself and debuff, as well as deal a metric ton of damage. She can also stop time and gather enemies, and she's not really gear dependent at all. It is extremely unlikely that she'll be challenged in the years, so she's pretty much the safest investment you can make. The Herrscher of Flamescion is the most recent Herrscher and is going to be the best Fire Valkyrie in the entire game. There are currently 3 bosses planned in which no one can compete with the Herrscher of Flamescion. She herself can be used on a multitude of different environments, and it's possible that she's only going to get better with time. With amazing coverage and covering the fire element, she's definitely going to be the Herrscher of choice for the coming year. Azure Empyrea is the best and most universal elemental support in the game currently. Azure Empyrea is a tricky case because she is used in by far the most Nirvana teams, but as far as any other content, she's rarely used. The other downside is that she is slowly getting phased out by element-specific supports, so it's possible that she's not future-proof. As of right now, though, I do recommend investing in Azure Empyrea. As of when, that's up to you, but personally, I would probably say after fully gearing 1 or 2 elemental Herrschers. The Herrscher of Thunder is last year's Herrscher, and she still finds a lot of endgame use. She's still the best option on a lot of different bosses, but after this past year, there are a lot of alternatives for the bosses she covers. So as of right now, I wouldn't say that she's a must-pull, but she's definitely one good option for you to consider. The Herrscher of Reason is another excellent Valkyrie that I recommend. She boasts one of the highest DPSs in the game, easily handles both bio and ice content, and she rides a bike. Currently, she is by far the most cost-effective Valkyrie, with all her best gear being farmable, and her weapon bin very accessible. Definitely a good choice early on since she's so easy to build. If the Herrscher of Reason was the great early game ice option, Nyx is the great end game ice option. Starchasm Nyx currently dominates the end game Abyss with the most boss coverage of any other Valkyrie. She has an incredibly strong mobbing passive, which puts her far above any other Valkyrie when handling multiple enemies at once, even over the most recent Herrscher. Another thing to consider is that while she does handle a lot of bosses, there are a lot of alternatives as well, and she really won't be needed until you're in Nirvana. She also has very little usage in Memorial Arena. On top of all of this, she does demand a good Haxxor Bunny and Azure Empyrea, meaning she's one of the most demanding Valkyries in the game. So next up we have Dea Anchora. Dea Anchora has had a lot of her gear dependency problems solved with the release of the Salvation of Sakura weapon, giving her a far more consistent source of Ignite, and it makes her a solid fire option who really only needs her weapon. So now the main problem that Dea Anchora has is that she's in direct competition with the Herrscher of Flamescion. Luckily for Dea Anchora, she still retains the top spot on the Ignite bosses and Rhymestar. On the flip side, the Herrscher of Flamescion can actually compete on these bosses just fine, and Dea Anchora really won't be needed until you're in Nirvana. Dea Anchora also has no chance on the fire mech bosses, which we can probably predict will appear much more often. Next up we have Bright Knight. Bright Knight is currently a Valkyrie that has gotten a huge power spike after the release of Abyss Flower, pushing her to new levels of strength. Currently, she holds the top spot on 3 bosses in Abyss, and she can hold her own on some bosses in Memorial Arena. The main problem with Bright Knight is that she's only really needed in Nirvana, and in Nirvana the rank difference between S and higher ranks is quite high. So because of this, I consider her to be probably the most expensive S rank in the game, and she's really only something you should consider after having a really well invested account. Starlit Astrologos is an incredibly strong physical support, and she's the one who pioneered the high damage supports that we see today. She's a lot of time fracture and she works well with free gear, and is generally recommended for most physical teams. Her signature gear is fantastic and is definitely something you should consider getting in the future. Fischl is the newest A rank and currently falls into that DPS support mesh category. She does great without much gear and can well compensate your lightning teams if you're severely lacking. In the end game, she performs very well and can even outperform Azure Empyrea when fully geared. Haxxor Bunny is the new ice support staple for Abyss, and unlike most of the other supports, I really do think that she wants her gear. Now, on the bright side, her signature gear is incredible, and I would recommend it regardless if Haxxor Bunny existed or not. Once you do get Turgenev though, she really does amplify your ice teams to the next level. Darkbolt Jonin is currently one of the strongest lightning carries in the game, and she's even able to compete at the very top. However, practically everything she covers can be covered by another popular Valkyrie, and Darkbolt Jonin's coverage isn't that impressive anyway. So unless you already have her invested in, it's better to spend your pins on the other Valkyries available. Fervent Tempo Delta is currently the best use for your Ancient Willpowers. She's an incredibly strong physical damage dealer who's used nearly every week in Memorial Arena. She's also very sufficient in Abyss if you have nothing else for early game. She really isn't that gear dependent either. Try to get her to double S as soon as possible, and if you want to go further, that's also fine. Lightning Empress is definitely someone you want to farm going into the end game. Her leader skill is just so valuable in Memorial Arena, and she also has some shared skills with the Herrscher of Thunder. While she may not help you immediately and directly, you'll definitely feel the pain of not having her at higher ranks later on. Next up we have Knight Moonbeam. Knight Moonbeam will probably always be meta in Memorial Arena, considering she's one of the only ways to get a good on-demand time fracture. She also provides an excellent leader skill and can apply a significant debuff through the Positron Blasters. Now she does get quite the gap up at Triple S rank. At Triple S she gets one more evade, but before you get to Triple S you can actually just use evade cooldown reduction Stigmata to make up the difference. Next up we have Fallen Rosemary, who is a fantastic lightning team asset. She got a massive buff recently, which basically skyrocketed her damage and making her less rank dependent as well. Her damage is so significant that she can even carry on her own, meaning she can be an alternative to the Herrscher of Thunder. However, keep in mind she also supports as well, and you would do well to use her with the Herrscher of Thunder. I would say she's probably the best target for your legacies, at least for now. Celestial Hymn is a physical support and provides one of the only sources of Impair and Gather. In this regard, she definitely gets overshadowed by the Herrscher of Sentience. Still viable, but her spotlight will be mostly in Memorial Arena. I recommend at least unlocking her, as she will be very useful in Memorial Arena since you need 3 teams there. So as a bonus, I thought I'd talk about Elysia, which is the 5.1 Valkyrie. Now since we're only on version 1 of the beta, I can't say too many defining things, but what we can do is discuss things that are going to be 90 to 100% probability of happening. So first of all, and most importantly, she is our first farmable ranged character. Now we do have a ranged Weather and Abyss. If you guys remember, it's Saha Asaka. So far, she's the only farmable option there, so I would say that she's worth considering just for that. And there's actually a pretty good chance they're going to release more ranged weathers because typically weathers have more than one boss, but ranged only has one. Regarding her competition with Delta, in Abyss she actually can take advantage of Starlit Astrologos, unlike Delta, which actually gives her a pretty big edge, and there's a good chance she's going to be better in Abyss just because of that. So I would say if you have Fallen Rosemary and Celestial Hymn unlocked already, definitely start thinking about whether or not you're going to farm her, because in the first 3 patches she's going to be discounted heavily, so you definitely don't want to miss that discount if you ultimately decide to farm her. Argent Knight is a powerful ice damage dealer. She's only used in Abyss, but she can compete at the top with very obtainable gear. The main issue is that she does need that double S rank, so if you do want to use her, you'll need to get her fragments through a spending event, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they made her farmable pretty soon. Stygian Nymph is an interesting case. Right now she's very useful in Memorial Arena for quantum bosses due to her instant collapse, and she can also function well as a DPS in Memorial Arena. In the recent update, they've buffed her sources of time fracture significantly, and as of now, it seems like they're pushing on the idea that she'll be a Memorial Arena slated Valkyrie. I personally predict that she's pretty much always going to be useful in Memorial Arena, but we'll see as time goes on. In any case, at the moment I wouldn't spend any crystals on her, but if you do get her from Dorm Supply, that's also good. Herrscher of the Void is the oldest Herrscher that has currently relegated to a 1-trick on the ranged boss weather. Pretty much no one can compete with the Herrscher of the Void on that boss, but I gotta say, investing for just one use is kinda grasping at straws here. At least if you do decide to invest in her, her gear is at least somewhat useful outside of her as a DPS. The other thing to note is that the Herrscher of Void is very rank dependent, much like Bright Knight, so you would do a lot better just to farm Elysia, which is coming in 5.1.